Hello, my 915 family. This is Victor, Realtor Vic from Clearview Realty, and this is yet another segment within Vic's Hub, where the segment is called Ask Vic. So what does that entail? Ask me anything real estate related. So I have a lot of people that ask me questions throughout the day, throughout the weeks, and whatnot about either buying or selling a house. So with that in mind, I figured, well, why not put a segment with those popular questions that they ask me. Also, if anybody out there does have a question about real estate, feel free to text me, email me, or even comment on this video any questions you might have, and we will follow up the following month. Like I said, these are common questions that a lot of people have when they're either buying or selling. So why not get ahead of the game and start asking these questions and putting them on the video so people can know more or less what this entails. So today with the questions, Jerry, the part owner of L&G Marketing Firm, is going to help me with reading some of the questions that we already got in the last couple of weeks.
All right, guys. Well, I'm going to ask you some questions and see what you can come up with. From a buyer's perspective, with everything going on right now, is it a good time to buy a house right now?
Well, it all boils down to needs and wants, right? I'll give you an example. A few years ago, it was a buyer's market, so there was a lot of incentives for the buyers, furnished homes, low interest rates, etc. Had a client that his credit wasn't there, so as much as he wanted to buy a house, he just couldn't. Fast forward, when the housing market just went up, houses were more expensive, there was not a lot of incentives for the buyer, but at that point his credit was good, he had already outlived his apartment, he outgrew his apartment, so for his need, the right time was then. So buying or selling, it's all on your needs of what you want. A lot of people want to upgrade, they want to downsize, or they just want to, they just relocated to El Paso, so they need a house to stay in and they don't want to rent. So for that particular reason, I mean, it's their time is now.
Question number 2 is, should I rent or buy?
That's a popular question. So a lot of realtors we push for it's better to buy. Reason is, it's a concept that it seems like you're wasting your money renting because you're paying somebody else's mortgage. In reality, a rental property is somebody's investment property, which means they're making money out of it. So in turn, they're making money out of you because you're basically paying the mortgage. Now, again, it all boils down to needs and wants. And I'll use myself as an example. For the longest time, even me as a real estate agent, I had to rent. Why? Because I was working on paying off some debt, I was working on other projects, so I didn't really have enough money to buy the mortgage, pay taxes, do repairs, etc. Sometimes renting is a little bit easier. Why? Because if I'm renting this house right now and the faucet breaks, what I gotta do is just call my landlord, hey, come fix this thing, and I don't have to spend any money out of pocket. I'm just paying the rent, and it's kind of like worry-free. But the ultimate goal is obviously, yes, it is to buy a house. But again, it all boils down to needs and wants.
Nice. Well, number 3, what is the process to buying a house?
The process to buying a house, well, I'll tell you Vic's process. So there's a right way, a wrong way, and then there's a Vic's way.
Okay.
So usually what I like to do is I like to have a meeting with my clients. Somebody tells me, hey, I want to buy a house. So the first thing I like to do is have the preliminary meeting where I sit down with them and we discuss their needs and wants. So it's a very broad spectrum with a lot of little details in between, but what I like to do in a nutshell is basically first meeting, see your needs and wants, we get you pre-qualified with a good lender, see what you can afford or your buying power, and then from there we start searching, look for the house, make an offer, go through that process, which is another lengthy process, and then from there we go all the way to the closing table or we hand over the keys. But of course, and that's why I like to have that meeting with people, because obviously we can be here for an hour of me explaining every little thing that I do, and set up an appointment with me and we can go ahead and discuss those points.
So right now, what is better to buy, new or used?
Well, it depends. Again, we go back to my favorite word is needs and wants. It all depends on what you want and what you need. There's pros and cons on everything. There's pros and cons with a new build and a resale. So it's not necessarily an old house, it's more so it's called a resale. So with that being said, it all depends. Sometimes it's really convenient to buy a new house, especially because they do have their preferred lender, so sometimes closing costs can be, they can help you with some closing costs. It's a brand new house, everything's under warranty for a very long time. But on the back end, if you buy a resale, there's also home warranties that you can buy that will cover you for those appliances that get broken. But it all depends. Like for example, if I want to buy a house in Cielo Vista area, they're not building any new homes, so I'm going to have to go with a resale. On the flip side, if I go to the Upper Valley, for the most part, it's better just to buy a new house. You know, you may be able to build or maybe get a custom build. So it all depends on what you want.
Okay. Question number 5. When buying a pre-owned home or a used house, how old does the roof have to be recommended before they have to replace it?
That all depends, and so one of the very important things to do when you're buying a house is you do an inspection on it. You get a licensed certified inspector, and they will do an inspection on the property, and then they can tell you this roof needs repairs, this roof needs to be replaced. That's a recommendation, and then after that we get a roofer, a licensed roofer to go, and he can evaluate. Now that's an easy way of finding out how long has the roof been at the house, because if they've done an insurance claim on it, and usually the buyer knows, and they're required to provide that information on the seller's disclosure.
Okay. Question number 6. What happens if like I want to buy the house but I need to back out?
So that's happened, you know, from time to time where a buyer needs to back down from the sale, or sometimes the seller backs out of the sale. So when I meet with the buyer, I want to make sure that they're 100% in, so we don't have that issue come to closing table. Now, life happens. I mean, a lot of unexpected things can happen. So in that regard, nothing really happens other than we just tell the seller, hey, you know what, I'm sorry, we're backing out of the contract, and more than likely you will lose your earnest money for the time that you took that house out of the market.
So now that we're talking about backing out the deal, so what is the earnest money now that you said that?
Earnest money is basically money that you're giving, that you cut to the title company, which they have an escrow account, where you're letting the seller know how serious you are about buying their house. So if I'm selling my house and you like it, you're making an offer, earnest money is negotiable, and that's something that you talk with your realtor, and usually it goes hand in hand with option time, which is a time frame that you have to back out of the deal and you can still get your money back. But that amount is still credited to you at the end when you finally close. But ultimately, earnest money is how serious am I that I'm buying your house? I'm giving X amount of money that I could potentially lose if I back out of the sale later on.
Okay. Question number 8 is I've always seen when you're driving around people that say house for sale by owner.
Okay. So for sale by owner house, I have seen that a lot, and usually it is somebody that owns a house that says, I don't need a realtor, I'm just gonna sell it on my own, I already know the process, I don't need a realtor because I don't want to pay any fees, which is fine, you know, it happens. And I've actually helped out a lot of buyers buying for sale by owners, because I do recommend that at least one party do have a professional licensed real estate agent, because there's a lot of variables and a lot of things that we don't know. You know, everything keeps changing day to day, so it's really important to have a professional that knows about the field, so that way they can better assist you with that purchase of the house. But ultimately, a for sale by owner is a guy that owns a house and he says, I'm gonna sell it and I don't need a realtor to help me with the transaction.
Okay, what about with those that put rent to own?
Oof, so rent to own, I personally would suggest to stay away from it. Usually a rent to own is a commitment that you're doing for a period of time with an option to buy the house. Sometimes, or oftentimes, that time spent, let's say you do a year lease, for that year you're paying rent, but it's supposed to be used as a down payment, but you have to be really careful how the contract is written. Again, that's why it's super important to get with a real estate professional to make sure how that contract is written and what are the pros and cons, so you can better, that person can better explain to you the process, because you're basically on the hook for that house. Before the lease expires, you have to transition to, hey, well, you know what, yeah, I want to buy it after all, or you back out, there's some contingencies that are in place, so it's super important to be able to go over that contract to make sure that, excuse my language, you're not getting screwed over.
So let's say for example, we'll say the subject is, let's say a customer's lived there 5 years, they've been renting, and then the owner's like, I want to give you guys a house, like selling you rent to own. but then a year into you making payments to own that house, they back out. The owner backs out and says, nope, never mind.
So that's why it's super important to go over that contract, because if you don't have a contract in place,
Mhm.
what's your proof to say, hey, well, I've been paying X amount? So there's a lot of contingencies in place that need
Always
to
get a
take place.
contract.
Always get a contract and always get somebody to look over that contract.
So would it be best to have a real estate agent look at that contract as well?
Absolutely.
Okay. My last question for right now. What if I want to buy a house, but I already own a house? I owe money on it. So let's say, for example, I want to buy a house, but I'm still paying on my house over here.
Okay.
Is that possible?
Everything is possible, and there's different avenues. The first avenue is if you could afford both mortgages, you can look at a house, make an offer, go to the closing table, you have both houses, and at that point you can decide, I'm gonna give this house away, I'm gonna rent it, use it as a rental property, flip it, whatever you wanna do, if you can afford both mortgages. Now, if you can't, and you need to either downsize or upgrade, then what you do is you do a contingency, an offer with a contingency, which all it means is, I want to buy your house, but I need to sell mine. So everything has to run concurrently at the same time to make sure everything goes smooth, and you're basically closing on your sell. That all depends on your income. Yeah.
So if you have the income, and let's say my house is, I only owe 30,000 on A, but I want to buy a second home, and I'm gonna rent out the first home, it's possible, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So those are the questions that I have as a buyer's perspective. Now, as a seller's perspective,
Okay.
I want to know how much money can I make out if I sell my house?
So if somebody's interested in selling a house, again, the first thing you need to do is contact a licensed real estate agent that can help you. So what I like to do is I like to have a meeting with my seller or potential seller, and it's basically called a listing presentation where we talk about the possibilities. But ultimately, what I like to do is I give them a net sheet, and that's all it is this is how much you can sell your house for, this is how much you're gonna get after you pay your taxes, after you pay the mortgage that you owe, after you pay all the fees, like brokerage fees, etc. So it's called like I said, it's called a net sheet, where you would basically explain all the expenses that come with selling a house. The biggest misconception that I've seen sometimes is, well, I bought my house for 200 and I owe 180 and I'm gonna sell it for 200, so that means I make 20. But it doesn't work that way. So, and that's what we explain in the listing presentation.
So like when you look at like online or Zillow or Zillow or anything like that, it shows house value 180. Could I get it for 180, or it has to be like in perfect, magnificent shape? Like,
So again, it all depends, and usually rule of thumb is usually Zillow and all those apps, they are not up to date
Mhm.
with we do what's called a market analysis, which means I want to buy or sell this house. How much is this house going for? And you do a survey of the area, 1 mile radius more or less, or you start expanding depending on the qualities of that house. And that's usually what we do 10 times out of 10 every time somebody wants to either buy or sell, to make sure that the house is priced right.
Okay. Question number 2: how long are the houses lasting on the market as of today?
So it depends on the price, it depends on the marketing that you're doing at the house, and it depends on the needs. Right now, inventory, believe it or not, is a little bit low in El Paso, but the turnover is still pretty good, about 10 to 15 days in the market, more or less.
So how can if I want to sell my house, I want to sell my house in less than 30 days. How can I sell it really fast?
Pricing it right, and having the right real estate agent that can market that property.
So that would be you?
That would be me,
There
absolutely.
you go. Now, let's say I do put my house for sale. How do I do, like, how many pictures do I put up? What kind of angles do I do? What do you recommend when you're putting up a house that you want to put pictures?
Well, the good thing is, as far as for the seller goes, that's nothing that they have to worry about, because I take that on, and I usually, 10 times out of 10, I hire a professional photographer that has worked with real estate agents, that has worked in the market for real estate, so they know the lighting, the angles, and all that good stuff. So all I gotta do is just hire the professional photographer. They do all the work for us, and you don't have to worry about it, because I got it covered.
There you go. And so I gotta know, what is a survey, like a survey?
So survey is basically a drawing accompanied by a written report, which indicates all the boundaries of real property and any improvements that you might have made.
Okay. Now, let's say you're buying a house and there's some repairs that you want to ask the buyer and the lender to do. Like, is the homeowner responsible for those repairs?
So there's two types of repairs. There's the repairs that come out of the inspection report. So every person that wants to buy a house, it's really encouraged to get an inspector, and they look through the house and every nook and cranny, and they look at all the deficiencies that the house has. That's all negotiable. If I'm the buyer right now, and you're selling this house, and I tell you, well, I want you to paint this wall, and I want you to take this out, and I want you to fix that, you don't have to as a seller. It's all negotiable. You can either do the repairs yourself, you can hire somebody, you can get an estimate and bring down the price of the house. So there's a number of ways, but it's a negotiation. Now, lender required repairs, those are totally different, because if you do not do those repairs required by the lender, they will not lend you the money to buy the house.
Okay. So let's say, for example, is there anything I should fix prior to listing my house? Like, let's say, you know, I have a leaky faucet, or my yard is has a couple weeds. Like, do you recommend a quick fix-your-upper thing? Clean up the yard, make it look more presentable?
So by rule of thumb, you always want to make the house marketable. What makes a house marketable? The number one rule is cleanliness. Get rid of the clutter, clean the yard, make sure everything's picked up, everything's organized, remove all the clutter. As far as for repairs, if you get with a professional real estate agent, we've been in the game for such a long time that we already know what the inspectors are looking at. We already know what the appraisers are looking at, because like, for example, a leaky faucet, it might not appraise depending on the type of loan, so might as well just nip it in the butt and just take care of that from the get-go. So what I like to do is, you tell me, hey Vic, I want to sell this house. What I like to do is I have a meeting with you and we do a walkthrough. We make a checklist of all the things that we find, you should fix this prior to taking pictures and prior to listing the house. So at least you're already halfway there.
Okay, so let's say I'm selling my house. What appliances do I need to leave to get more money? Technically, if I want to get more money, do I need to leave appliances to get more money?
As long as you leave the dishwasher and stove, you don't have to leave anything else. Now, goes back to making the house more marketable. If it does have a nice refrigerator, if you are including a washer and dryer, because it's literally turnkey, I don't have to buy anything, so a buyer will be more inclined in buying your house. Now, will it add a lot more value? Probably not, but it kind of goes hand in hand with a lot of houses, a lot of people. I have had transactions where the buyer walks in and I have the seller, and the real estate agent reaches out to me and tells me, hey, my client likes this house, they want to buy it, and they want to buy it furnished. So that's a whole separate negotiation that has to be done and come into an agreement, and it's been done before, where they buy the house furnished.
So that was one of my questions was, can I get more money if I leave my house furnished?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all negotiable.
So if they come in, they say, I want your living room set, TVs, except for mattresses, but I'm figuring no mattresses, but everything, bedroom stuff, everything.
Yeah, and then going back to that, it's like I said, it's one of those things that if I'm buying this house and I like this table, this is not real property. It's not part of the house that you're selling. And there's also a disclosure that you put what's not included with the house, right? But if I say, you know what, I like the table, how much can you sell it for me for? Hey, give me $500, let's do it. So you write up a little amendment and you include that on the sale of the property.
Oh, that's something new. So I got a question for you. When you're buying a pre-owned, a used house, okay, what do I need to disclose? Let's say I'm selling my house. What do I need to disclose about the house?
So when you're listing a property, you're going to do a form called seller's disclosure, which is a long checklist of anything that's wrong with the house, structural. If you've had any leaks, if you had any insurance claims, like for the roof, or maybe had a flood. So all that has to be disclosed, any deficiencies and whatnot. And anything that's not working properly with the house. Let's say you know your stove is busted, so you need to disclose, yeah, there's a stove, but it doesn't work.
Okay, so like, you don't have to disclose, I know it's not solid, but you don't have to disclose if someone have ever committed suicide or died or anything like that. You don't have to disclose that?
If somebody, unfortunately, if right now something structural with the house falls on me and it causes my demise, at that point, yeah, because it was something that had to do with the house. So that needs to be disclosed.
Anything else?
It's up to the...
It's up to the homeowner?
Right.
Okay. Well, I mean, those are all my questions that I've had to ask as a seller's perspective. I mean, you were very honest, and I think you were very good about me that's going to school for real estate. Now I know a little bit more.
Okay, sounds good. And like I said, if anybody out there has any questions that's real estate related, please send me a text, 915-526-8929. Send me an email, realtorvic915@gmail.com, or even comment on this video and we'll address those questions as they come.